Hello, gearhead friends. I wanted to make a video about the last trip I just did. It was really long. I went through many states. I covered over 3,000 miles on my 2023 KTM 390 Adventure. And so I wanted to do a much more in-depth review of this motorcycle, having done that trip. To start with, if you set out to do long distance riding, it's definitely not something that you want to start with. I've been riding since 1979, and I mean that since 1979. I have owned motorcycles, ridden motorcycles, literally since 1979, every year. And so taking on a long distance trip like this in a short time period is definitely not for everybody. But if it does sound like something that would appeal to you, there are things that you can do to make a motorcycle work for you. I would like to say, first off, though, that the motorcycle that you buy, your decision should be based more on function over form. What a motorcycle looks like will matter less and less to you when you have to live with it every day. So an example of that were my Ducati motorcycles. They were absolutely stunning. Beautiful motorcycles. And on a racetrack, they were absolutely phenomenal. But then when you tried to live with them for any distance, suddenly they weren't so attractive anymore. The comfort level was awful. The compromise from you was awful. And so it's just something to think about when you go looking for motorcycles, especially if you intend to do any long distance riding. I specifically bought the 390 Adventure because I am a long distance rider. I prefer long distance, and I know that that's kind of subjective. Long distance can mean different things to different people. Some people, 300 miles is long distance, and other people, 300 miles before breakfast is considered normal. if you can wrap your brain around that. So when you're looking at motorcycles and you're looking at a motorcycle like the 390 Adventure, keep that in mind. You know, what's its intended purpose? And for me, I think of motorcycles as tools. One of the commenters wrote that they were concerned about buying a 390 because they wouldn't be able to keep up with other folks that were on 790s, 890s, 1290s, just other large displacement motorcycles. And the long and short answer to that is, well, you're not going to keep up with them. It's just basic math. You don't have the displacement to keep up with those bikes, at least on the road, on paved surfaces. If you maybe have a ride with people on bikes of that size, and maybe the ride is, say, 20% pavement and then 80% off-road, I would say definitely take the 390. It shines because of its lightweight. It's an incredibly easy motorcycle to handle. Now, you're not going to be going off, triple jumps or anything crazy like that. You are going to be making compromises because you simply don't have the suspension travel. But by and large, if you ride smart, you will have little to no problems keeping up with those larger motorcycles, especially off-road. You're simply not manhandling as much weight as they are. And when you get on different surfaces, horsepower becomes a deficit. It becomes a negative. Horsepower only matters if you can actually get it to the ground. And in many off-road environments, you simply can't get it to the ground. The dirt, is loose. Maybe it's wet. It might be muddy. So all of those things become deficits to those large motorcycles. To the 390, it's a piece of cake. And if you do flop this thing over, it doesn't weigh much. I don't need a NASCAR pit crew to come help me get this motorcycle back on its tires. It simply doesn't weigh that much. So, you know, I tell people you wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hang a picture on your living room wall. That's the wrong tool for that job. You would probably get a tack hammer. And the same thing goes for motorcycles. I buy my motorcycles with an expressed purpose. I have a purpose that I intend to use this machine for. And if I'm trying to use it outside of that purpose, then that's on me. It has nothing to do with the machine. It's my poor judgment or my poor choice. So all that being said, I did get home last night. I was on the road for about 10 days. 9 of those days were spent in the saddle. We took one day off to visit family in Colorado, and a little rest day, much needed rest day. And then I continued my ride home. Did a combination of pavement and off-road, dirt, some hard pack, of course some rocks, all kinds of nasty stuff like that. My younger brother's EXC 500 was very well suited for the really, really, really rough terrain. In fact, he walked away from me and left me in the dust because I had to pick smart lines. I couldn't just pin the throttle and just start bashing. I had to pick smart lines. That being said, still, he never got very far ahead of me. Never got very far ahead of me. So it was a mixed terrain type of ride. When I got home yesterday, I had about 3,076 miles on the clock on that single trip. The total mileage on the bike since I picked it up from the dealership brand new about, I guess it's about 8 weeks ago now. Total mileage on the bike's about 4,000 miles. 4,000 plus or minus. I can't remember exactly what the odometer said. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the things about this motorcycle, some of the things that I've done to it to make it long distance worthy, and some of the attributes that are already on it that make it long distance worthy. And one last point with regards to your motorcycles. I tell people all the time to adjust your dreams accordingly. Adjust your dreams accordingly. Don't expect, your Desmos Adichie to go run, out in the dirt of Moab. That's just an absurd choice. So adjust your dreams accordingly. All right? So let's get to the bike. So I'm going to start with number one item. I mentioned it in the first video I did about this motorcycle, and it's the windshield. It has a factory windshield, and then I simply add my little clip-on. This is a universal clip-on from Amazon. I've put this windshield on about 5 different bikes. My neck is really bad. I have to have a windshield that puts the airstream at the forehead of my helmet. And this little windshield, this cheap little windshield, is completely effective. It works very, very well. The next thing that I added was bar risers. I just put a set of 1-inch bar risers on there, and of course the Himalayan clutch lever, the Himalayan clutch cable. It's a longer cable by about 4 inches. If you use the stock cable, it's going to be too tight. So you need to get that clutch cable, and I believe it's off the any current Himalayan. I don't think the Himalayan model is very old. Somebody else did mention that they changed out their brake line when they put 1-inch bar risers on. I didn't find that to be an issue. I found that I had plenty of slack still in the stock brake line, so I did not change out the brake line. But if you want to change yours, that's completely up to you. The other thing I added early on was the simple GPS mount. which is right there. Again, that's an Amazon cheap GPS mount. You do have to order this base and this base. They are separate items, and when you get this base, you're gonna have to go buy the screws. I went up to my local Ace Hardware and I bought the screws that matched the thread pitch of the base. All total said and done, I don't think I spent more than $35 on that mount. The rest of the mount is a RAM mount, and it's one that I've had for many years, and I just simply move it between bikes. I change it between bikes, and it's still very effective. On-road, off-road, it held up perfectly well, never ever lost the device out of it. Another simple thing is the charger that you plug in down there. Apologize, I'm tripping over my bike lift here. Right down there is your charging port. Right there. The charging port works really well. I use this particular type of charger. This charger cost me nothing because I stole it from my father-in-law. So it was free. I like it though because when I get off the bike and I go into a building or a hotel, boom, I pop it up. I can plug it into the wall, and I still have charging capability for my other devices. I tend to travel with several different devices, and so that little charger works really well. Now I know that you see that USB is exposed, but I rode in several downpours, and even though it was exposed, it never caused me any issues. When I plug this in down here, just like that, I then take the cap, and I just simply roll it to the top, just like that, and it keeps it nice and secure. The charging port is nice and secure. I don't run really long charging cables. This is a nice shorty, and when I have my device in the mount, boom, it just plugs right in just like that. It's really simple and it's really effective. Works out really well. Charged everything all the time just like I needed it to. The last thing on the handlebars as far as long distance riding goes is that. I've used throttle rockers for over 30 years. If you're on a motorcycle that doesn't have cruise control and you don't have a throttle lock, a throttle rocker is one of the best investments you can buy. They literally cost about $10. I give them away to my friends and family as gifts. They are so effective and so easy to use. When I'm on the road, all I have to do is rest my palm on that, so I don't have to constantly grip the throttle. I just simply rest my palm. And then when I get to the dirt sections, I either roll it around to the bottom so it's out of my way and I can run the throttle normally, or I simply take it off. It just rolls off just like that. Boom. That simple little piece of plastic makes a world of difference, especially when it comes to long distance running. I cannot encourage you enough, if you're gonna do distance travel, to get a throttle rocker. Now, once you put the throttle rocker on for the first time, it's gonna take some adjustment. You're gonna have to get used to it. You're gonna have to find the right pitch as to where you're gonna put it on, high or low, based on your riding position. So be forewarned, it's gonna take a little getting used to. Once you get used to it though, you'll wonder how you ever got by without it. Amazing, amazing, simple little device. The tank bag is a factory KTM tank bag I ordered from the dealer. I ordered it about a week after I bought the bike. I think the cost was $180, $200, somewhere in there. It served its purpose. I put the rain cover on it many, many times because of some of the downpours I was riding in. Tank bag stayed dry every single time. Sometimes I couldn't get the tank cover on fast enough. Still, the water did not get through to the inside of the tank bag. So it did its job, it served its purpose. Whenever I have to fuel up, I simply come down to the sides. There's one of these on each side. I unclip them just like that. And come over and I unclip this side just like that. Then I simply roll the bag off to the side. Obviously, make sure your pockets and zippers are all closed when you do that, or you'll dump all your stuff on the ground. But there it is. The tank is easily accessible, and it takes me all of 10 seconds. No big deal. The last accessory I added is that SRC Moto tail rack. The tail rack itself is very well built. It's very stout. It's very sturdy. I had no issues with it at all on the road. It had plenty of places for me to hook gear to, and you can see it's pretty dirty. Went through a bunch of nasty stuff with it, and here it is, still going strong, still stout. Money well spent. And I believe this company is distributed here in Oregon out of Pendleton. They were super quick to ship it. I did have a bit of difficulty mounting it. I have a video on that earlier in this series. And it's kind of a combination between KTM and their love of Loctite, and then a slight misalignment of the holes in the rack itself. I did have to drill a couple of the holes to make the rack fit. But after I got that on, no problem. Money well spent. I absolutely love it. Tires and brakes. These are the stock tires. That's stock after 4,000 plus miles. You can see that it's starting to get a little bit of flat in the center. And that's just simply from doing a lot of high-speed highway running. And any tire is going to do that to you. Variable compound tires tend to be harder in the center, softer on the edges. To try to counter that, but it's pretty typical wear for extensive highway running on tires. The front tire is still in really good shape. This is my wear bar right down there. There's my wear bars. So I still have, I would say, probably 3/16 of an inch, or as some folks would say, I think I've got about 8 millimeters of tread depth there. Excuse me, scratch that, 4 millimeters of tread depth. Apologize. I'm not real good at the conversions on the fly. The brakes, these are stock brakes, factory brakes. They worked fantastic. They worked really, really well. There were a couple of instances where I absolutely had to grenade the brakes to stop the bike in time. And the ABS worked flawlessly. The brakes still have good feel, good initial bite. Combined with those tires, the feedback from the road is really good. I have zero complaints about them. And no, the Continental TKC 70s do not work well when the road is coated with Mormon crickets. But unfortunately, I don't think any tire would work well in that environment. It's basically like riding on Vaseline. That's what running over a road absolutely coated in Mormon crickets feels like. It's just a terrible sensation. Next on my list is the chain. I heard a lot of people have issues with the chain on this bike. They have issues with premature stretching, premature wear. I guess sometimes you can get a Monday or a Friday chain, which means it was built on a Monday or a Friday when people still had their heads in their asses from the weekend or moving into the weekend, or just bad luck of the draw. Now, I've spent a lot of money on chains in the past and still had a link break at 1,000 miles. This chain, however, as you see it right now, after 3,000 miles, is exactly as my dealership set the tension. I have not had to adjust the chain one single time in 3,000 miles. I've done a couple of clean-offs on it to get dirt, dust, stuff like that, especially in the off-road routes, to get that sort of stuff off of there, and then just a little bit of oil to keep it nice and lightly lubricated. Otherwise, zero issues with the chain and not any measurable amount of stretch. So my chain is obviously broken in, it's settled in, and this is its happy spot until who knows how many miles. But the motor is small, so it's not putting huge power pulses into that chain. In reality, on such a small displacement motorcycle, the chain should last a long, long time. So for those folks that did have issues with it, I don't know what to say. Maybe a manufacturing flaw in the O-rings or in the metal itself, the metallurgy or the assembly. It's hard to say, but I'm not disputing that it happens because I've seen it firsthand that it does happen. But in my instance, on this 2023 390 Adventure, I have had zero issues, and it is still in really, really good adjustment. So one of the other things, one of the guys online said that I should get a medal for is that I did this entire trip on the factory seat. That's the stock seat. It suits me. The seat does not bother me. I can ride on that seat for literally hours. My test for any motorcycle is that if I can sit in the seat for at least an hour at a time, then I can make long distance trips on that bike. Because my rule is that I stop every hour, I get off the bike, I walk around, I stretch, and I get some circulation going, and then I get back on the bike. So I understand anatomically we're all different. The manufacturers can't possibly make a seat that suits everybody. It's just impossible. So what they tend to do is make a seat that's functional, reasonably well, and that looks good, that matches the theme of the bike. That tends to be how manufacturers end up deciding on a seat shape, its density, and all of that stuff. So keep that in mind. The engine, when you ride a motorcycle for this kind of distance, you start to really become in tune with it. At least I do. I become in tune to the sounds that it makes, to where it really makes power, and also to vibrations. This motorcycle will vibrate from the motor at about 6,100 to 6,300 RPM, which ironically, with the gearing that I've done for it, I have a 14-tooth countershaft sprocket, puts it right at 65 miles an hour. So that's where I feel the vibration the most. Now, I mostly feel it through the pegs. I am probably going to put one of the ECU tuners on it, maybe that Fuelite X. It seems to have pretty good reviews. If you are somebody who has used that tuner, that ECU mod, please comment if you found that it smoothed the engine out. I know that all motorcycles built in America or imported to America are notoriously lean. They are running lean fuel conditions, which causes them to feel rough and causes them to feel like they run rough. So if you have put that on, please make a comment and let me know if it helped you with that or not. Because again, I probably will be investing in that. It's such a small bike. It's an inexpensive enough investment to help smooth the motor out and be able to access the power that it can make. The next thing on the list here is exhaust and the skid plate. I'll just be frank with you about the exhaust and the skid plate. To me, they look like somebody drug a magnet through a junkyard. They're just hideous. Both of them are hideous. The exhaust is hideous. The skid plate is hideous. The skid plate, I did take a couple of knocks on the bottom with rocks. Nothing major. But, I mean, I'm sorry. It just looks like a Frankenstein. It is just so unattractive. I get it. It's somewhat functional, but I would not want to be hitting rocks with that skid plate. And I did go out of my way to try to make sure I did not go over anything of high enough clearance to actually impact it, although I did a couple of times. But so both of those items are on my to change list. But in reality, again, I just did over 3,000 miles on it, and neither of them caused me any issues. So if you were to buy this bike, you know, it's optional. You could change them or you could not. It's up to you. It's completely up to you. Another thing is the foot pegs. A lot of complaints about those foot pegs simply because of the angle forward, the pitch forward. In my off-road riding, I didn't have any issues with them at all. They didn't bother me a bit. But, you know, I've been riding for a lot of years, and I've ridden some real, you know, piles of shit, to be honest with you. But these foot pegs did not give me any issues whatsoever. Even when my boots were wet, I did not slide off of them or slip off of them. I didn't have any ankle strain or anything else like that. I understand how some people do, especially if they do a lot of off-roading. I get it. Then they would probably want to change out their pegs to a flat peg. But again, still didn't give me any issues. Fuel range and estimator. So the computer has a fuel range estimator that's going to tell you what the estimated range that of distance that you can run on the tank is. And when you fill the motorcycle up, it might say 242, 242, 211, 272. Right now it says 155 miles of range. I've done 74.1 miles on the tank, so that gives me 74 plus 155. And that's going to change based on how much you're using the throttle. The fuel range indicator is a nice tool. It's one of the nice to have tools, but I would not rely on it because, let me rephrase that. I wouldn't solely rely on it. Because it's going to be based on your throttle usage, period. Depending on the payload of your motorcycle, the grades that you're running on, the wind, the headwinds that you might be pushing, then fuel range literally within a mile could drop to 100 based on where that throttle position is at. The computer is calculating in real time, and so I just wanted to point that out. It is a very, very handy feature to have, though. It's extremely handy to have. But as you can see, my trip number one is running at 74.1 miles right now because I reset my trip meter every single time that I stop for gas. I'm old school, I'm in the habit of doing it, and I usually compare that trip meter to the estimated fuel range too, and between the two of them I get a pretty good idea of about the kind of distances I can run. And so with this particular bike, I can safely hit 200-mile jumps every time, as long as I don't run it with the throttle pinned wide open, pushing a headwind for long distances. Then I would guess the range would probably drop to the total range might drop to the 150 mark. As you can see too, there's trip number 2 coming in at 3,076.7 miles. That is the trip meter that I reset the day I left my garage, and that's where it's run till I got back home yesterday. 3,076.7 miles in 10 days. Total odometer 4,044. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. Last thing I would like to point out is the turn signals and the headlights. I get a lot of questions from folks that are in other countries, and they say, how come your headlights aren't LED? I have no frickin' idea why they're not LED. LEDs are so cheap and inexpensive and easy to put in anymore. I don't know why they're not. I really don't. But I will tell you this, they're effective. The simple incandescent bulbs are effective. None of them blew out. They're easy to see from long distances behind you and in front of you. So now they're working. I won't replace them. I can go buy bulbs at the auto parts store with no problems at all. And lastly, of course, is that headlight. That headlight on this bike is amazing. One of the videos that I'm going to upload is Bryce Canyon in Zion National Park in Utah, where we're running through a bunch of tunnels, and my brother's in front of me on his EXC 500, and you can see the difference in light, and I'm riding behind him, and you can see that my headlight on this 390 in low beam is lighting up the whole tunnel, whereas his headlight might as well be a flashlight or a lantern, you know, compared to mine. The headlight on this is amazing. I did have to run after dark in the rain, where the critters were plentiful, you know, animals and stuff like that, and I really need to see really well. That headlight gets the thumbs up. That headlight is the bomb. Very good. Tail light is the same way. It's an LED tail light. I don't know why they went LED on the tail light, but not on the turn signals. I don't know. I got nothing. I don't know how to explain it. So that's about it for me for now. I I will be posting videos in the future of different mods I might add to the bike. But in reality, you know, straight out of the box, off the showroom floor, I probably only added, geez, about maybe $500 worth of accessories to make this bike distance and road worthy. That's a pretty good deal if you ask me. That's a pretty good bargain, which is exactly what I was hoping for when I bought it. And not just that, this thing is an absolute hoot to ride. If somebody called me up tomorrow and said, hey, you can go back out on the road for 2 more weeks and ride your motorcycle, I'd say, I am there. Count me in. It is just so much fun to ride this simple little bike. I just enjoyed it so much, I just can't express that to you enough. So, until next time, folks, keep that helmet side up and be good to each other. Bye for now.